Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Bandle Banter. Today we've got a great guest on. We have got Ghaelwinds, who was a top 64 player on Yasuo. Ghael, welcome to the cast.
Hey, thanks. Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
It's a hell of an achievement because that makes you 100% more successful than any set player in the West. How does that feel?
That's not hard to do. My deck's just better.
Oof. I do have Todd coming on as a future guest, so I'll throw
You
some
tell him I
heat
said
his
that.
way. Now, I imagine that's going to be more of a post-mortem about why I should have played Yasuo instead, but we'll see how that comes out. So
In the yield days, I used to start with set. I was super hyped for set at the very beginning.
really, I mean, I was all about set. I've been playing a lot of it. I felt like it just had reasonably good matchups and everything. I didn't feel like any of your matchups were great, but it just felt like, hey, for consistency's sake, you will be able to play a game against everybody.
Right, exactly.
But that's not fun if those games are losing games. So maybe we should just be on better decks.
True.
But you obviously have a huge following from the online day. I say the online days like they're in the past. Now that we're in paper, I guess it kind of is.
Well, no, I mean the online community did really well at Houston. I think I was going through the top 64 and about 8 of them were just people from our online sphere, which I think is a pretty good showing considering there were a lot of professional players from other games that came out that don't really share in that space. So I was pretty proud of how online community went.
Yeah, there was so many great players that did amazing, like Prismat, yourself. Sold out. I believe he made top cut, or at least his deck was everywhere.
No, Sold was top 32.
Top 32 as well.
Yep.
Dressed as Annie, Little Red Riding Hood as well. I found out about it and I was like, this guy is hysterical. Like,
yeah.
So we should have saw you dressed as Yasuo probably at the event.
I think I got the abs for that.
The abs for that. This game is all about abs. I do realize like Lee Sin, Yasuo, so many of these shirtless men set, all absolutely jacked. And it's just like, it's a holiday season. You can't ask this.
You know, sex sells, right?
It really...
For both sides of the spectrum.
It really does. It really does. So for today's video, I'm going to do this a little bit differently because you've done a really in-depth Yasuo guide on your YouTube channel where you go through every card, why it's there, how you came to the conclusion, and your matchups. And I really want to encourage our listeners to go and check that out. I will be including links in the description down below so people can go and find you. We'll also do another shout out towards the end, so we'll give everybody anywhere you want to be found. We will point them in that direction. So what we're going to do is we are going to briefly touch on the deck, but today's focus for this episode is going to be on the philosophies, preparation, and decision making that you went through to get ready for Houston. Because let's not just reinvent the wheel when you've already done that. So we're gonna go on to the next step, which is drinking fine wine and bantering.
Ooh, did you send me some? Did I miss something in the mail?
I think you have to pay an $85 fee to bring in anything now. I mean, it's probably waiting in customs, so you might want to check on that. But yeah, so you said this in your video was your first TCG event, and I wanted to know kind of what drew you in, because the way you talk about your deck building and preparation would be something that I would hear from a seasoned veteran. It's not like the way you talk is just... You've definitely done this before. This isn't your first rodeo, but I was really surprised to hear that it was. So tell me a bit about it. It's like, have you ever been tempted by other card games before, like Lorcana, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon? What about Riftbound got you to commit to the ridiculous process of going to a major event?
I've always been interested in like the mythos of physical card games, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There is a sort of like urban legend around how card games grow and what happens in them that always made for great stories that I was always interested in, like maybe being a part of. My dad played Magic, and I was always interested in how Magic worked, but I just hated Magic. I hated lands, for one. I can't stand lands. I could talk for days about how much I hated lands. Yeah. Yeah, so I was always vaguely interested in them, but I've always been in love with games in general. Like, game theory has always been super fun for me to delve into. I played a lot of League, I've played a lot of hero shooters, and I played a lot of TFT. So it's not like I don't know game theory, and, you know, TCGs are sort of just building on that same game theory, although I think they were earlier than some of the games that I'm mentioning. But it's all sort of the same thought process. The way you think about games transcends genre most of the time.
Yeah. I can agree with that. It's super interesting when you have to consider there's advancing your own strategy or responding to your opponent's strategy. And with card games, it's like you build your entire deck to be in either position as you don't know what the matchups are. You've got like a rough idea, but you're actually kind of, in a weird way, betting against what everyone else will do, not necessarily what's 100% correct.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've always found that fascinating, where you're like, okay, so if we statistically put out this is the absolute mathematically best deck you can play, there'll be people that don't play it because they've got other reasons for it, and you've got to guess what they're going to do, not what they should do.
Yeah,
and that's like such a weird part of the process.
Yeah, I've talked about this concept a little bit in that making a deck is equal parts logic, equal parts art.
Yeah,
you can go a full logistics statistics way in building your deck and just only use the stats to back up what you want to put in your deck. But the way that when I would try that, it would end up feeling too rigid.
Yeah.
So at some point, I had to just add in cards that I felt like adding, that added a texture that I wanted to see, and that ends up making the deck flow a lot better. The best example of that is keeping in the Ride the Wind.
Yeah, yes.
In the sideboard, where this card would have been cut if I was using just straight logic, but keeping it in was like an expression of art almost for the deck, which I think is a very interesting concept. And it ended up performing super well at Houston. So there's definitely something to be said about adding artistic choices into what should be a logical deck.
I do agree with that, actually. There is some value to understanding that the whole tournament is so much more than just playing the cards you bought. There's like such a commitment with your travel, hotel, time, energy, money, and ultimately how you're going to be on the day, like your energy, maintaining that. And having cards that give you massive feel-good moments and stuff like that can actually give you those little spikes to get you through the whole event, where you're like, when this card resolves, I have a very good experience. And that can sometimes contribute to giving you just enough edge to not perhaps get tilted by some RNG or some MF player just immediately dropping their Mind Splitter on you, followed by a Dead Bloom, when they lost the game when it came out the opposite direction. But, you know, no one's ever salty about that. But I do like having some part of that. Your own character is going to be in the deck for where you feel comfortable in terms of like navigating a game state. So let's go to when you chose Yasuo, because ultimately it was widely considered very weak early on, but I don't think that was ever because of the power. I think it was just generally due to the huge amount of complexity of the legend. But what made you so confident to say Yasuo's a real thing when everyone else was like screaming no? Because there's like a real cost here. You've gone, all right, I've bought my ticket. I'm going to do this. I'm going to literally be playing a deck that no one else thinks that is playable. And you just went, no, I'm right. Everybody else is crazy. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, a lot of this is a strong sense of egotism. You have to start there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you playtest with Sold Out, so like I could immediately get that.
Yeah. A lot of this is like you have to bet on yourself first and foremost. But the reason to start with Yasuo was because he was doing something completely unique that no other legend was attempting, really, which is playing the game on the position axis. And I've talked about this very briefly in other places, but there's like 5 axes of attack in this game, which is board, runes, hand, position, and points, right?
Yeah.
And of these 5, the least understood is the position axis.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Movement is grossly misunderstood.
Yeah. So I came to the conclusion that if I can maximize value out of this one axis that no one else pays attention to, I can get much more value out of it than anyone else could. So that's what I did. I took this legend. I knew it had strength. I knew the legend effect itself was very strong that people were discounting.
Yeah.
And I just tried to take it to its most optimized conclusion.
Yeah, and I think you've done a really great job of it. We will talk a little bit about that when we cover the high-level deck, because the way you built this deck is completely different from how every other TCG player in any other game would have built their deck. So I'm excited to talk a bit about that, but yeah, Yasuo Unforgiven is such a crazy ability. It's just mobility on everything. It's basically budget accelerate or retreat or get out of fell free card, effectively. It's not a react, but it's just in terms of just adding 2 energy costs to any unit, you get a move, which is so good, units only normally get to do 1 of them in a turn. So
yeah,
it's interesting when a lot of people were looking at the value of things that you get from something like Kai'Sa, and you're like, hey, this offsets my power cost for the entire game, so I just get to play better cards, versus something like this that actually has a real cost to play, and you have to build around this a lot more.
Yeah.
So let's go into your deck identity. So obviously you've got your YouTube video, which I do encourage people to go see. It is fantastic, and it does very much cover everything. But for the people who perhaps haven't seen that yet and they're going to go there next, could you perhaps explain the deck in like 1 or 2 sentences about what the Yasuo deck is trying to do?
So what we are answers to the meta at its base. Everything in the deck is meant to dismantle what every other deck wants to do, and using as few cards as possible and as many answers as they can. So every card in the deck is very modal. It has about 3 different ways to use each and every card in the deck that you are needing to optimize in each and every matchup correctly.
Yeah, one of the things you said is a deck where you're just looking to answer everything your opponent's doing and stop them from actually having their ideal game plan, and you don't have a game plan. Your game plan is to make their game plan not viable.
Correct.
In probably less heavy-handed words, in the way that I've just framed that. But that's actually kind of like crazy when you think about how you've got to prepare for an event, because you have to know exactly what every other deck is trying to do, and that's just so much extra time into playtesting and stuff like that. That must have been really crazy for you.
Well, I think that was the benefit of what this long amount of set 1 that we get. I don't know if a deck like this can ever exist in a tournament that we've seen, because we had so much time with set 1 to find a deck that can answer everything in the way that this one can. I think it'll be very difficult to emulate this same thought process ever again.
Yeah, that's true, because we've technically had all of the cards revealed since, August? So we've had a lot of time. We've been playing online quite a lot, and we've had lots of opportunities there to figure everything out and know what you can get away with 1 copy of, what you can get away with 2 copies of.
Yep.
This is a very mechanical deck, and I think it definitely does speak volumes to your level as a player when most people just opted away from this because they're like, I don't want to play a whole weekend on a deck that doesn't immediately feel incredibly powerful, and I have to think about every single turn and every game state. Because what you're saying with a deck like this is my entire experience depends on what you're doing, as opposed to this is my game plan. My goal is to execute that game plan as efficiently and as often as possible. And that is such a massive mental load that's going to be putting on you throughout a tournament that's going to end up making you feel really tired. So like, how did you manage the mental fatigue of playing this contraption? This is crazy.
Immense practice. I didn't feel tired at all in the tournament because I knew all of my lines and all of my matchups so inside out that making the plays wasn't as mentally taxing as it could have been. I played this deck so much. I've playing it for like 3 months now, I think, basically.
Yeah.
Into every deck possible that I can think of. I've had practice into some of the best Teemo players. I've had practice into some of the best Leona players. I have played into every matchup possible, and maybe like 1,000 games into Kaisa, right? So
wow.
It is just taking the load mentally off by just having immense practice, basically.
I could see that on some of your feature matches, actually, when I remember it was one feature match where you're kind of like considering 2 options and you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, if he has it, he has it. That's like the impression I got from your body language when you then shoved the play in, and it was like, yeah, that's just somebody who's so relaxed at this point.
Yeah, I ended up watching that video back, and I was so mad at myself in that game. Oh my god. I didn't realize that I had traded 2 on guards for Billionaire's Zonias.
Yeah, that was a bit like ooh, are you sure?
I just blocked that out of my brain, apparently. Because I had no recollection of me ever doing that.
It's 2 energy for 2 energy. It's not that bad, surely.
Yeah. And when I went back and saw that I did that, I was like, what? And I was like, okay, maybe I was exhausted. At that point, I saw that and I was like, maybe there was some exhaustion happening, because that was tough to watch.
It's a long event, and it does catch up with you, especially when all the games start blending together. Which is actually why I really liked that you had such a detailed log on your video about all of the individual games you played, because I will forget about them a round or 2 later. I'll be like, oh, I played against who was it? Oh, there's some guy. He was red. Oh, Volibear, right? And I will forget like my matches, and yours is like, yeah, I did this, and this is the exact sequence of plays that won me this game, and it was just like, oh yeah, this person pays attention.
Yeah, except when I make an awful misplay, then I just have to remove it from my brain, apparently.
It's a key part of not tilting at tournaments is being able to
self-defense protocol.
Just shut that part of your brain down when the person's like, the little you's in your head going, what are you doing? You're throwing it so hard. And you're like, shh, not now. We still have to win this.
Right.
So we have your battlefield philosophies, and you locked in on game one for the Zones Warren because it let you play this kind of very toolbox deck where you have just lots of one-offs and two-offs for answers, and you were always prepared for every matchup in some way, and you could just throw out the cards you didn't need.
Right.
That's a solid strategy, and I do want to touch on that as a deck building philosophy in general. But what I'm kind of interested in is these other two battlefields that you went with, which was Targon's Peak, which is when you conquer here, ready 2 runes at the end of turn, and also the Windswept Hillock, which is units here have ganking. Both of these obviously very strong Yasuo, but what else did you test that you decided these were better than? Like, tell me a bit about the ones that you looked at and just said, yeah, this sounds great on paper, but it's not good enough. Like, what did you write off and why?
So most of the battlefields have stayed the exact same the entire time of testing. There was very, very few battlefield changes ever. The only battlefield change that happened was originally the 3 battlefields were Dreaming Tree, Targons, and Windswept.
Right.
And the Dreaming Tree was taking the same logic as on Warren's, where, okay, on game 1, I can just cycle through my deck easier because I'll be able to draw more cards, right? So it was the same logic still. It was just a different form of it. And Dreaming Tree eventually had to be cut because every other deck in the format just started using it equally, and I needed a more biased field. Battlefields should always be biased towards you. You can't just have a battlefield that gives everyone benefit, because then you're not getting special benefit. Your battlefield needs to give you biased benefit.
Yeah.
So I had to go for Zon Warrens and bring in a package that would make it more biased towards me, like the Scrap Heaps and the Razas. And that was basically the only battlefield change that happened throughout the entire process. I did briefly, when I was trying to cut Dreaming Tree, go to Back Alley Bar, because it was the most biased towards me. Yeah. But it just eventually didn't have enough oomph to deal with the problems. So we ended up on Zon and added in Scrap Heaps to add some bias.
Yeah, I really liked that, and it led into your deeper philosophy of deck building, and that was to play your sideboard in the main board, which is such an... We've seen it a few times in other card games, like in Yu-Gi-Oh! There were people that would start with all their cards sided in and then it just take out the cards you didn't want. But realistically, it just doesn't work as well as it does here. I guess that's because of all of the card filtering in that. But it basically screams super inconsistent is what you would initially think when you look at this. It's like, you've got a game that has no deck searching, limited card draw in what you're playing. Is like, how do you ever see these like one-offs when you need them? Like, and have the confidence to say this is the correct ratio? Like, walk us like how you got to those conclusions.
So a lot of the one-ofs are just extra copies of other cards. Like, let's look at the one of Charm, for example.
Yeah.
Charm also is just another copy of Fight or Flight. On the final turn where I need to move off their unit, Charm is just a Fight or Flight. So my 2 of Fight or Flights are actually 3 of, because I have this Charm that's doing something similar to that. So these are all sort of the same card to my brain, but Charm is doing something extra unique where I can use it as a kill move.
Yeah.
So I've like given one of my Fight or Flights a special ability to kill a guy.
And it really does do that. That's great.
So to me, these aren't like, it's not an inconsistency for Charm. It is just my 3rd copy of Fight or Flight that also has something added onto it.
For that toolbox situation.
Yeah, for that toolbox. And also just purple in general as a color is the card selection color.
Yeah.
With Stack Deck and with Traveling Merchant, I can see through my whole deck pretty much. I am not afraid to find a 2 of when I need it, because I have Stack Decks and I have Merchants to filter all through my deck. So it's not an inconsistency at all for 2 ofs in a particularly purple deck.
Yeah, Stack Deck is actually nuts. I kind of would like an overnumbered Stack Deck featuring Twisted Fate, to be honest. I think that
there we go.
That would be crazy money to take an uncommon card. It's just really cool, and I guess it comes down to a little bit of like what Sold Out was saying with cards like Stack Deck. You always need to know what you're digging for and knowing what you're throwing away, what you won't have access to in the later stages of the game. And it just comes from that real intimate knowledge of your deck and the matchups and what the opponent's doing. Is this kind of the same thing as the Annie deck, where you could misplay as early as like turn 2 or 3 and then realize you've thrown the entire game? Or have you got like more time to figure out what's going on with this deck?
No, I'm way more resilient than Annie, because Annie has to be constantly ahead on tempo, whereas Yasuo can play from behind if he needs to. So I have more flexibility in my macro game plan than Annie does. Annie has to do one thing, and if she doesn't do that one thing, then she just loses the game on the spot. Yasuo has many different modes and many different speeds that he can play at. So if I do a stack deck and I see 3 modes that I can play off the 3 cards, right? I can play hyper aggro, or I can play mid range, or I can play full late game. In my stack deck, I can see those 3 options. I see the 3 paths. No matter which one I choose, I can still play a game with. It's not like I have fully lost, but sometimes the aggro mode will be better than the late game mode, depending on the board state and the matchup.
Yeah, of course. But I actually really like that, where it's like you got a lot more flexibility, where it's like, okay, I know that I can do this, this, or this. What's my opponent played? What have I seen in game 1 or game 2? Where do I need to be? And from that experience, you can use that. Whereas with Annie's, it's like, I got to do the same thing every single game.
Yeah.
There is no deviation from this plan.
Yeah.
So that's actually really, really cool. And obviously, Yasuo Remorseful being an absolute crazy card who wins games all by himself. And you don't even need to draw him. But we never play additional copies because we could never really afford to play more than one.
Correct, yeah.
We've only got the 1 copies of Hourglass, which is actually interesting in the sense that a lot of people...
There's a second one inside.
Oh, on the side, yeah, with the 8 singleton cards in the sideboard, which are all just...
Well, no, there's 2 rebukes there. Come on.
Oh, that's true. There is 2 rebukes. I need to learn to count. This big 2 here. Oh, rebuke.
Which was a change for just Houston.
Right, yes, because I remember when we talked about it, you had the last-minute change.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit later because I got so many questions for that. But yeah, no, overall, I love the build and I can see it on Piltover Archive. You already had 23,000 people look at your deck list, although that could have just been you hitting F5 over and over again to appear higher in the stats.
There you go.
You never know. I'm going to assume it wasn't that. You're far too busy actually winning than cheating Piltover Archive internet fame.
Yeah.
So in terms of... I want to talk a bit about playtesting and data, because there's a very big difference between playing games and actually testing. Because you could just go to your Nexus nights and play a couple of games, you could go online and play in tournaments and stuff, and then you get experience playing the deck, but you're not really testing or tracking anything. What did you do to prepare and build the Yasuo deck? Like, how would you tell a player if they were like, I really want to get better at tournaments, I want to be just like Ghaelwinds when I grow up, you know, for the Prestos and that are out there listening. Like, what advice would you give them to actually focus in on that playtesting and how to get the most out of it and how to get better actually getting ready for tournaments?
So this is something I don't have a great heuristic for, as obviously this is my first time really doing what I did. So I don't have a fantastic way to explain what I was doing, but something I would recommend to people is to get your head out of data. I hate using data. I think data is some of the most misleading pieces of logic that you can use when playing games in general.
Right, because again, you're not playing against a machine, you're playing against a person who's emotional. They're going to make different plays, not always optimal. And if they're always playing optimal, they're very easy to outplay because you know what's going to happen next. So
even besides that point of like human nature, it's also an organic meta regardless. So there will always be a level of prediction that you have to apply. Even if you have data that's completely up to date day of, it will change in an hour based off what people decide to do, right?
Yeah.
So I never liked to fully trust in data like that, like looking at, what type of decks will be where all the time. I don't think that's very helpful. I think the most helpful data is your percentage chance to hit something.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is like my deck is predicated on the ability to have 2 2-drops on turn 2, and my ratios in the deck are built to do exactly that. In game 1, I have about 70% chance to do that if I go first, and in games where I'm going first, I have about 75% chance to do that. But there's a difference between data and math for your deck, like stats and ratios.
Yeah.
Focus on your stats and ratios. Focus on making your math fit your plan. Don't necessarily worry about what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you would not be the first person to go to a tournament and say, oh, I should have won, but everybody's playing off-meta decks and I lost. Like on the meta deck.
Right.
It's like, well, maybe you made a wrong read or something there.
Right.
So is there an easy way for you to memorize your decision trees or what you're doing in any situation? Is there like key ways that you can sort of just go to shortcut things where you go, okay, yeah, I can do this, this, and this? Like, have you got like a trick for that?
How I liken it is like chess openers.
Okay.
Where I've played so many matches against some of the meta decks where like I know that if this is the Kaisa start, I know that we're playing a London.
Yeah.
And so then I can narrow down my trees that way by just knowing what kind of game we're in on turn 2. This is something I'm going to be writing more in depth when I go and do my Kaisa matchup video later today, trying to explain this theory of like the chess matchups in the Kaisa in particular, how different it is versus if she starts with a 2-drop, which 2-drop it is, and if she has Hexray in hand, and if she has Falling Star in hand for even just turns 1 through 2.
Yeah.
All of these are completely different branching paths for how the game plays out.
Yeah, and you can lose in that spot if you handle it completely wrong. Cards like Fallen Stars are massive blowouts.
Yes, for sure. And just accepting risk in that case is good too. There's a lot of games where I'm just like, in my top cut game,
Yeah.
I played into absolutely everything for my opponent. I just put everything on the board and said, if you have the card, you win the game. If you don't, I will win the game. Which I was sort of forced into that position for outside game reasons.
Yeah.
But there, you have to be able to accept your risk. That's something going into the tournament that I like knew about like tournament play, is once you're in these high stress environments, you will become less risk averse.
Yeah.
So I forced myself into risk situations just to combat
You
that.
went to the casino and just went all on black.
Sometimes, yeah. For that top cut game, I definitely did, just because I had no better plan. There was no better lines that I could take. And you just have to be willing and ready to accept high risk.
And sometimes that's what it takes. Ultimately, in a huge tournament, everybody's playing their best ability. Some luck is going to come into it, and sometimes you can make all the right moves and lose. So there's a real skill into knowing when, okay, if they have it, they have it. I have to take this risk, or the other. I'm giving my opponent more time to actually draw the answer I'm worried about. This is my moment. This is the last chance I get. And learning when to pressure that is going to really help people improve their win percentage just by a few points, which can make all the difference between hitting top cut or bubbling out and not making it, and wondering why intentional draws are a thing. But so here's a question: how do you decide why you lost a game? It's like when you have to take your ego out of it, where you're just like, oh, my opponent got lucky. Like, is there like an easier way for you to do that, to go, okay, this is the moment where it all went wrong? Like, what's the best way for that? You said you just have this defense mechanism where you shut down part of your brain to not tilt.
Well, that's only in like specific games. You can't do that in testing, obviously.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing that, then you'll just never learn.
You just keep making the same mistake. It didn't happen. I don't remember that.
In Riftbound, there is usually one turn that is the difference turn.
Yeah.
And all other turns are sort of leading up to that. And that turn can be turn 3, that turn can be turn 6, that turn can be any turn of the game. But it only happens once in a game, pretty much. And you can feel that turn when you're playing.
Yeah.
As well. You can just feel that this is the pivotal turn. I make the decisions here. I have full agency. My choice here changes the game. And those are the turns you have to memorize. When you get that feeling, it doesn't matter what decision you make at that point, because there's too many decisions that you could make. You just have to like save that position. Either if you're online, you could take a screenshot of it, whatever, or just start recording at the state, or just have a great memory of it and just take time with that position later, make any decision, and then go back and play through all other decisions and see what ended up better. You can start to grow heuristics for certain matchups that way, where it's like, okay, in general, if confused, hold, right? In general, if confused against this matchup, go back to base and ready an attack.
Yeah.
But just taking those moments where you feel like you are the one in control and that your decision matters, and just playing every line possible from that just to see what you can glean.
I really like that, actually. Just taking a mental snapshot and then going back, because there's been plenty of times where I've been playing into Kaisa where I frequently found myself in the position where it's like, I can play around Thousand Tailed Watcher or I can play around Time Warp, but I can't play around both. And I lose if they have the one that I don't guess for. So it feels like a little bit of a coin toss. And there's probably a lot more contextual clues that I could be getting from the way my opponent's been playing the entire game in terms of which one I could play around, and probably freezing those game states and reversing it and sort of understanding what kind of got us to that point would probably be really helpful for then making those predictions in the future. Obviously, sometimes they can just have the one that you didn't account for, or they could draw it. But I do like that. It's like, you don't need to memorize the whole match, just key moment, that key turn that the game was decided. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a good Yasuo player versus a great Yasuo player. Like, when you're walking around your local Nexus nights and you see somebody playing a Yasuo, how do you know, like, yeah, that person gets it? Or whether or not it's like, they're just learning Yasuo, they're just getting started on their journey?
I think the biggest tell for me when a player is good is when they have, like, a buff in their hand that can win a fight, and they choose not to play it because the fight in the future is more important. This is most prevalent in a matchup like Yi, where a lot of times if you are like if your 2-drop is defending and they push in theirs with a buff, you can just let them have it. That because that buff differential will be way more important when it's used on your Yasuo into their board. Choosing not to use your answers is actually the highest skill expression, I think, in the deck.
And that comes from sequencing, matchup knowledge, and having the discipline to not just respond and go, okay, I can see an easy pickup here. I should slam down my on guard versus just let him have it. This point is fine. I'm going to be in a better position later.
Yep. I mean, there are a lot of turns where I'm holding up four runes, and I have answers in my hand, and I just choose not to play them because they had to overcommit into something, and me using my answers here, I already got what I wanted. They have already overcommitted into my guy. I don't need to use answers. I have already achieved my goal of making them use more. So you just don't use anything and hold for a later turn.
There's a real opportunity cost with leaving runes up. And I love this because I think this is actually a really in-depth discussion that you can have about the game in general, where not developing because you're leaving up answers means that your opponent can potentially still tempo by throwing down lots of stuff. But there is a real value in unused runes if it prevented your opponent from making optimal plays. And knowing where those choke points are, it just, again, must have been thousand games of practice to get you there, because that's quite the skill to go, all right, I can afford to burn 4 energy here just to make my opponent's life miserable.
Yeah, I mean, when you have 4 up, the opponent has to push a lot more into your Wielder of Water than they would ever want to. If they go too little, then you have combat tricks to win the fight, and then they can't push back over him because they committed too little. If they commit too much, then they've overcommitted to a board state that I can swing back over with like a 2 energy Raza that's in my hand, right?
Yeah.
So it's always putting the opponent in a position that no matter what choice they make, I will come out on top. And sometimes my decision tree for that is to not play anything. Just let them make their mistakes and move on.
Yeah, and there's a real interesting thing there where, depending on what they choose not to do, gives you a lot of information about what their game state's at or where their head's at. If you could see that and go, okay, they should have done this, but they didn't. Why? And sort of navigating that kind of stuff. There's like, we communicate so much by what we don't do versus what we actually do. And that comes up a lot in games, at least from my experience.
Yeah, there's also the mind game of if you're playing games and you always have the answer, your opponent will stop playing the optimal line expecting the answer. My round 6 opponent was a Kai'Sa, and I ended up 2-0ing the Kai'Sa. In game 1, I just had all the answers when I needed them. Just sometimes the deck just gets lucky and just has the correct answers at the right time without even trying, and so I won that game. And then game 2, I knew that I lost if my opponent Acacian Rained in a specific manner, but he didn't play it, so I thought he didn't have it. I play a Mind Splitter, and I see the Acacian Rain in his hand. And I was talking to him after the match. I was like, why didn't you just play it there? And he was like, oh, well, if I play it and you use this exact 3 combinations of cards, I lose the game on the spot. And I'm like, yeah, that's true, but then you're banking on me having exact 3 combinations of cards. There's a mental load that you put on the opponent for playing like this that is measurable and valuable as well.
What's actually extra dirty about this is that Mind Splitter gives you perfect information of the game state, so you can even anticipate how many runes to hold up that your opponent would be worried, like what they're going to be worrying about in those decisions, if the player's good enough for the game. So probably don't do that against somebody who's in round 1 playing Lee Sin. They're probably not going to have the same level of thinking with that. You go, if I leave up 4 runes, they're going to think I've got 2 discipline. And it's just like, no, I just played my guy because I wasn't thinking that far ahead. So there's a lot of really strong mind games that you can start playing after you get that information and rip, of course, the best answer out of their hand. Mind Splitter is such a good card.
Yeah, and a lot of this, too, is like you have to evaluate the skill of your opponent, too, to decide which plays are valuable and worth it. I remember playing against, I think, my round 4 Yi, who ended up being in top cut, but I didn't know this yet. In game 1, I put a trap on him where I had a Gust in my hand, and usually a lot of green players will just chain all of their buffs together, and I can end it with a Gust, nullifying all of his buffs. And the way to play around this is just to let the chain resolve as you go.
Yeah.
So I played this trap where I was just going to keep buffing my guy and then end the chain with my Gust. But my opponent was much stronger than I anticipated and just let the chains resolve as they came. So my Gust never got value, and I ended up losing that interaction because of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of plays that you need to know the skill level of your opponent before you know if you're allowed to make it.
There's been so much interesting content that's been put out by people for card games in general for this. It's like, oh, are they playing on a game map from a different game? Does it say regional champion? You should be worried. Are they playing with proper sleeves? Is their deck unsleeved? And I think like all of those reads, you can throw people off and be like, just show up with your super fan Volibear cards and you're like, yeah, and then you just play like the perfect Kai'Sa game.
That stuff's fake. That stuff's so fake.
I know, but people need content. Otherwise, they've got nothing to talk about. But it's getting that read. I guess it comes from like those situations like we were talking about with the Yasuo earlier, where you're just like, okay, that person could have played that card, but they chose not to. Therefore, they know what they're doing. And then it's like, when you see like some expression of that, it's like, okay, they played this matchup, they know what they're doing, so how do I play against somebody who knows how to play against this matchup? In fact, that leads a bit back into testing. How do you stop that kind of thing from testing where it's like, okay, we are now just playing against each other because we both know exactly what we're doing so much versus a particular matchup? Like, that eventually starts polluting it when, you know, like, I guess Sold Out at some point just knows card for card every card you've got and your play pattern. So you're, realistically, it's not kind of the same thing as getting real tournament experience.
Yeah, I think that metaphor works better on the opposite end. Like, me and Sold would play a lot, right? And it got to the point where I knew Sold so intimately that our games were pretty simple for me to maneuver. Also because Yasuo has a winning matchup at Annie anyway.
Yeah.
So that on top of that knowledge of what he wants to do all of the time really benefited. Like, the matchups that we were having just ended up being not as helpful as they could have been.
Yeah.
Because now I'm just playing against Sold the person and not Annie the deck.
Yeah.
And a lot of this you can fix personally by just taking lines that you would never play that seem playable, that are like adjacent leave good. And I'll do this a lot too, where just to throw off the opponent, I just play a different type of opener than I have before.
Oh, yeah, and then it's just like, oh, something's up. This isn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, like, a thing I'll do against Kai'Sa is game 1, I'll only ever have one unit on the board so that their Falling Star is getting no value. And then game 2, I just have the 2 units out. Maybe they mulligans the Falling Star because it got 0 value in game 1. So then now this opener has a slight edge because there's a world where they mulligan their Falling Star because I played around it all game and they couldn't get value out of it.
Oh, that would be so tilting to be that player. Just like all of a sudden it's like, wait, you've gone Shield Poro and Traveling Merchant? No, this isn't right. Why did I throw away my Falling Star?
Yeah, and these are traps that you have to constantly be setting up into your opponent with a deck like this.
In that situation where you eventually start realizing you're playing against Sold the person, like, do you expand your playtesting group to then play against other people so you can get sort of that fresh eyes experience? Or do you just say it's better to keep the deck secret and then test like this? Because you kind of get caught in that situation where you're not really getting any new experience.
This deck, I wanted to keep secret, but I still needed to play.
Yeah.
Right? I still played in online tournaments with this deck. I just made sure that they didn't share the deck. Like, I wouldn't join online tournaments that would post the deck list, for example.
Yeah,
but I would still play in online tournaments and even be on stream with this list. I was on stream multiple times with a list that's very similar to this multiple times, just because I needed practice against plenty of players and in that environment. So yeah, I mean, I played plenty of different types of groups, plenty of different types of players with this list. I just didn't show them the full list. Yeah,
because you've got a chance to figure out what the side deck's going to be, especially on something that's so controlling, where you've got to decide exactly what's the right answers and what's the right quantities. They're never going to be 100% sure on what you settle with. You just kind of want a general direction of what I need to do, which is... Yeah, go ahead.
I played a lot into Timo, iChance.
Yeah.
Who did pretty well at Houston as well. He ended up just barely not bubbling into top 64. And I wouldn't tell him my list either, but we would play often.
Yeah.
And every time we would talk, he would be talking about this card that I have in my deck. And I'm like, no, I don't have that card in my deck. And it's just sort of like a game that we were playing with each other, basically. It was like, how secret can I keep my deck while still playing against? And the answer came out to be like fairly still secret, even though we played quite a bit.
It's because you need the exact picture to figure it out. But what I'm imagining is you're playing these mind games with each other is, have you ever watched like Death Note with the inner monologues turned off? And you just kind of see the characters staring at each other awkwardly, like silence for like 3 or 4 minutes. It's kind of a little bit like that. He's thinking this, so I'm thinking that. But then this happens. And all that's, of course, to everybody else, no idea what's going on. But no, that's really cool. I'm just going to take a look at some of the key cards that I was a fan of. I really liked the Mask of Foresight. I thought that was very heads up. I know very few people were considering Mask of Foresight. It's seen a little bit of play, but not really a ton. And this card does a lot for you. I'm a huge fan of this. Like, you talked about how it makes your 2-drops just walk over their guys, and it just throws that combat math in the early stages of the game. completely out, but it's only good enough to play one copy of in the main, because having two ends up being redundant, which is just coming to those kinds of conclusions. Like, do you just play that card into every matchup at free and then you just keep reducing it until you find the sweet spot? Or do you just start with one and say, that was so good, I could do it again, and then you put two in? Like, which order do you do your reducing or increasing in your playtesting?
I think you start everything at 3 of, and then just slowly start reducing. There's some cards that I just can't bear to put multiples of, like, what's the recent example for set 2? Spirit Wheel. I've been playing with Spirit Wheel. I cannot put that card as a 3 of in the deck. I just cannot do it.
It's basically Dreaming Tree, isn't it? The Spirit Wheel.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, that would be, imagine just drawing multiple copies and not having any of your self-targeting spells. It would just be like a nightmare situation.
Yeah. There's Spirit Wheel is for any targeting, by the way. It's not just
right.
spells.
Okay, yeah.
So it works for like equipment and like Tide Turner and things like that too.
Oh, that's really cool. But yeah,
it's a pretty cool card.
Can see what you mean by the redundancy.
Yeah.
For Traveling Merchant, one of the questions that always gets asked when it comes to playing it is like, what do I actually discard? So many people move this thing and then go, oh god, I don't want to throw out any of these cards in my hand. Did you take like Sold Out's approach where you're throwing out additional copies of your 2-drops? Or was it just so drilled down that it was like, whatever I don't need in this matchup gets canned, and I'll take anything other than this card in this matchup? How do you get used to very quickly mapping in your head the correct Traveling Merchant discards?
The best answer is like, will I use this card next turn?
Okay.
That's the most important question. It's not about full match. It's next turn. Your next turn has to be very strong every turn. So if Merchant is discarding something that you need in 4 turns, that's fine, because it's just going to be dead for you until then. You need cards that will do something now. A lot of the times Merchants is getting rid of 2-drops. A lot of the time he's getting rid of the Gust as it's past its prime now. Yeah. If I'm moving the Merchant on turn 3, the Gust is not getting value anymore. There's a lot of obvious cards, and then there's some that are just like not as obvious. Like a lot of the times I get rid of Azonias, even though it could be helpful. It's just like not doing what I really need it to do. And sometimes the best card to get rid of is actually the Discipline.
Yeah, which draws a card, and you're like, but it gives 2 might and it draws a card. You're throwing that away, but
sometimes
if it's not impactful immediately, it just sits in your hand, right?
Yeah, sometimes 2 energy is just too much for what I needed to do. There's a lot of times where I need to hold up on guard and defy, and like my hand is on guard, defy, and discipline, and I have 2 energy, and I just need to be able to play both of those, so discipline has to leave, even though it's arguably one of the best tricks in the game.
Yeah, that's what they say is when it comes to directing or something, be ready to cut your darlings or something. And it kind of, I get that vibe a little bit, whereas it's like, this card is so good, but it's not good right now, so I have to throw it out and just be okay with that. It's not the best situation, but it is the correct decision.
Yeah.
Something else that was really interesting with your deck is you went with such a high concentration of 2-cost units when everybody else was saying the correct number is 8 or 9 at the most, and you were just like, I go for 10. I can slide in an extra one. I'll go up to 11. Like,
yeah.
Going against the grain on that, was that just particularly around the mechanics of the deck, and you're kind of like, okay, I know exactly what my game plan is, and I want to go 2-drop, 2-drop push. Like, so I need to make sure that's happening more than anything else, if that's a core part of the plan.
That was a play pattern that most people had not clocked was strong. I never saw anybody trying to do that in Yasuo, and against pretty much every deck, that is oppressive.
It's very oppressive.
Just to be able to have both the 2-drops on turn 2, even with no energy up, it doesn't really matter, because they still have to, use something to get over it, and that's fine. And you still own 1. So that's a very important reason about why I have 10 2-drops. If that play pattern wasn't as strong, then I probably wouldn't have this many 2-drops, but because it is, that's what the ratios are meant for. And that's why it's 10 in game 1, because I'm 50% chance to be going second, 50% chance to be going first, basically.
Yeah.
So 10 is a fine number to split the difference, whereas when I go first, I put in 11, and when I go second, I go down to like 8 2-drops.
Yeah.
Sometimes 7. I might go down to 7 2-drops in a lot of matchups, and just have the wielder and the 7 2-drops for my good 90% chance to hit something on turn 1.
I do kind of like, in some ways, get a little bit of like how Sold Out was playing, which is like move my 2-drop in, play Sneaky Deckhand. And it's just like how impactful that is. And it's like, what if I could play that with a game that doesn't lose if that gets blown out? So it's like, there's the same logic there with Yasuo. And even like on the Windswept Hillock, having that option to just push your 2-drop into Windswept, gank across, and have tricks to score those 2 points is extraordinarily strong.
Yeah, and Wielder is the MVP with the Windswept Hillock. If I can start a game with Wielder on Windswept, it's really strong. I just play him solo carry the whole game, basically.
Yeah, this card is one of those ones that when we all started, it was like, okay, this card's amazing, and it's like, oh, it's actually not so great, and then it kind of got forgotten about, and then it shows up here again, and it's like, yeah, top 64 list. It turns out this card was good all along. You were all wrong. You just gave up on him. But yeah, Wilder being just a bit of a powerhouse, and he's so expendable as well. Like in terms of what pressure he puts on the opponent for such little opportunity cost, he seems very impressive in this list.
Yeah, he can solo win matchups. There's even against Kai'Sa's, I've had this Wielder of Water score me 6 points.
6 points against Kai'Sa.
Yeah, sometimes they just can't out him. A lot of Kai'Sas are petrified to Falling Star him,
right?
Because he's just one guy. Like, what is he gonna do? So he just doesn't get Falling Starred. And if I have all the correct answers, like they try to Void Secret, it gets defied, and they try to push him with Darius, it gets Foffed or rebuked. So like he can just solo win the Kai'Sa matchup sometimes.
If I was a Kai'Sa player, I'd probably lie about it and say, oh, he just had everything. And I probably wouldn't tell them that Wielder of Water scored 6 points against me because I didn't want to interact with it. But that's, of course, when you then... It even makes the Darius attacks kind of a little bit worrying. Like, are they going to massively overcommit a Darius Cleave into a Wielder of Water? And then you just fright or flight them? Like, yeah, there's so many mind games there. I really like... I keep saying this a lot because I am genuinely super excited for you. And I'm very glad that you managed to get that medal card for the best performing legend. You definitely deserved it with this list. But considering that, let's talk about the last minute change you made right before the tournament. So before Houston, there was a side event where basically the XOs got a buy, so basically a free win. And you made the swap of adding Rebuke. Was it Rebuke in and Extra Mind Splitter out, or the Extra Mind Splitter in, Rebuke out?
Yeah, Extra Mind Splitter in, Rebuke out.
Yeah, it's like... What's really interesting is like you're already financially and emotionally committed to the deck that you bought there. You've already like gotten the flights, you've done all the testing and stuff, and then you're in that last minute, that night before, and it's like the 2 a.m. deck tech where you're like, oh yeah, this changes everything, I'm going to put it in. What made you go and register that change and say, I'm okay with this? Because you said, like, looking back, you would have never have done that based on how the format turned out. But what actually was the trigger that made you go on your deck registration sheet, this is correct?
So the pre-registration event had a massive amount of Kai'Sa.
Yeah.
It was all Kai'Sa and Annie the entire time. Almost 50% plus Kai'Sas and Annie. And the Mind Splitter just wins that matchup more.
Yeah.
So to me, I was like, okay, maybe the percentage of decks that I thought was going to happen at Houston is not actually what will happen. And so I hedged slightly more for what I saw. I didn't want to change too much, obviously, because if you go over the rails, then you'll just throw everything out of whack.
Yeah.
So I just changed one card and took out one card just to hedge slightly more towards what I was seeing that day, which ended up being incorrect because the actual event ended up being pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. My original board would have been much more serviced for the event than the change because the numbers ended up being pretty close to what I expected. I think Kai'Sa was like 30%, Yi was 15. He was a little bit lower than what I thought, and Annie was 10.
Yeah.
So these were all about numbers that I had figured and what I had planned my deck for. So the change ended up hurting a little bit, especially because now my run became all Yis pretty much. I played against 4 Yis, and this change is worse into Yi than it is into any other deck.
Yeah.
I'd rather have my Rebukes than my Mind Splitters. So it's a minor regret, but nothing that's too crazy, and just goes to serve like, hey, just trust in yourself when you put the deck together. It's fine.
It's like, past Matt knew what he was doing when he did this. He wasn't drunk at the wheel, right? Right?
Yeah.
He knows, trust it. As I think that's a trap you can get into where it just like, all of a sudden you start trying to justify why you want to make the change, even though all of your testing, all of your experience, all of your muscle memory has said, this works. And you're like, I still have to change this. But I guess there's some strength being able to be flexible in that sense. If you do go there and see everything being played is like not suited for your deck, maybe you do need to change. But I do wonder, and this is another mind game, if everybody showed up with their Kai'Sa deck just to see what everybody else was playing, and then they switched to their real deck for the main event, if everyone's playing their secondary deck for these wins, because the prize is pretty massive. It's a buy, which is a free win.
Yeah, I think that was part of the thing too, is right, the main event at Houston has the best of pressure, whereas this pre-event doesn't have that pressure at all. So you can just play whatever for the pre-event, and you just might as well play best deck anyway, just for that event. It doesn't really matter. But for a lot of the people that are hunting for the best ofs, there are probably a lot of people on Kai'Sa for that pre-event that were not on Kai'Sa for the main event, just because the main event matters more for their off-meta deck.
Yeah, you also just don't want to spill the tea entirely. And the side quest for those metal cards, I heard the value of them, even just the ones that you got from playing in the side events and the slightly different cards, were extortionately massive. So I can understand there's a huge incentive to try and keep your deck tech down as quiet as possible until the big day happens.
Well, I don't think anybody really knew the value of them going in, obviously.
Yeah, that would have been a total guess for sure.
Yeah, I think most of the guesses were around like 10 to 15.
10 to 15K.
And then yeah, 10 to 15K. And they ended up being like triple that pretty much.
Triple. Oh my god. And did you hold on to yours? I mean, if somebody's offering me like 45 to 50K for it, I'm probably handing it over.
No, I'm selling it. We're fielding offers currently. I'm going through Rob Stanley, who is a pretty reputable card seller for high-end cards. So I'm using him as my seller, and we're fielding offers and getting that process gone.
Yeah, I can agree with that. There's kind of, as much as it's like, I want to hold on to this memento, I can also see that this is quite a lot of money, so I would be very, very tempted. So I can completely respect letting it go from the collection.
Yeah, and that's what I talked about too. Like, the amount of money that I can get from this card is actually enough for me to take Riftbound in a full-time realm, where it pays for basically a year salary.
Yeah.
So I can just take a full year to try to make something of this new space and have that sort of adventure to figure out how to, monetize myself in this world at a more steady way.
If you're doing all your playtesting online and you just acquire cards for the event, that is like 4 years living in Brazil. Just throwing it out there. Huge fan of Rio de Janeiro. Obviously, traveling to the larger events is a bit of a problem, but it's, you can basically just fund actually trying to take it seriously, and your content's doing extraordinarily well. I think your Yasuo video already has more views than my highest performing video. So congratulations
on that. It's good.
Yeah, you got 8K. You got 8K views, and I've got 7K on the interview with Sold Out. So you've outperformed my best performing video so far. Although your achievement was personal, mine was interesting guest. So it's incredible, and I really do hope you actually start to pick up and more people keep an eye on you for your future decks that you come to, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But there was a skill that you flagged in your video, and it was regards to your matchup versus Leona, where you were using hand reading, which is when you figure out, based on what your opponent is or isn't doing, what cards they have in their hand or most likely responses, so you just play around those. Like, how do you improve at that? Is that part of the game theory? And is it best to start with just saying, tracking the energy and saying, okay, they got 2 energy, that could be +4 with double unguard? Or do you say, okay, because I attacked last turn and they didn't do this, it probably means it's not unguard at all? Like, what is the best way for players to improve at this skill?
I am super bad at hand reading, so I am not the person to ask about this.
Okay. You're playing a hand reading deck. It's just like, okay, that's why you play the Mind Splitter, so you don't have to read. You can just see what the cards are playing.
It's to just completely remove that whole process. I don't necessarily see this as a hand reading deck for what it's worth. I'm basically just playing the numbers for what is in your deck the entire time. I'm not actually playing what's in your hand. I'm just playing what you could possibly have all the time. I play my turn as if, what is the worst possible turn that can come out of your hand next turn? Do I have a way to deal with that? Is the second best still playable?
Yeah.
I don't actually try to read hands, and if I do, I'm doing it more subconsciously.
Okay.
Like the Leona game, I was just able to put them on that just because the way they're playing was bizarre, that the only thing that made sense was tons of stuns and the Shen that I had rebuked. So I knew that for a fact.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm not doing a lot of active hand reading. I am just playing out what their best 2 lines could be on their next turn. Do I have an answer to that? And then are the subsequent lines still, can I have potential answers for those? And if the answers to these are all yes, 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 then I do the line that I want to do.
So what would be the best way to then practice that? Would that be to play games against those decks? Because when I talked to Tersadon, who unfortunately didn't make the top cut, but had a good run, they said all of their playtesting was about 80% Kai'Sa mirror matches, and that was the bit they were drilling down. They said 20% was spent on everything else. Yeah. So would you encourage people to do more of just playing against the wider field, or just playing against the best deck to get used to sort of making those kinds of predictions and saying, okay, this is what they could have, and this is what I need to just not lose to?
No, you have to play against a wider field. That's all. I played against specialists of pretty much every legend, just because not only is it more interesting to think on your toes for new things, it gets you into the habit of, thinking about the new things that are happening, right? Like that's a super important skill to have. And at some point, your returns for playing into Kai'Sa every day are so low. It got to the point where before Houston, I was getting stressed out about it, and I just wanted to jam Kai'Sa Yi every day. And I started doing that, and I was like, you know what? This is not helping. So then I just went and played, League? I went and played League for that week before Houston, pretty much.
Just gave yourself a break and said, look, I need to stop stressing about this. I need
Yeah,
to save my money.
because I said, I'm not actually learning anything. These lines are the same lines I've played over and over and over again. This isn't doing much. Let's just do a Dark Week, which in theater, Dark Week is after the first run of show. You don't have any rehearsals for the week before the second week of show. And it is said that second week of show is a lot better because people are refreshed and ready. So I was like, you know what? Let's just take this concept and apply it to this competition. So I took a Dark Week for myself and just started playing other things and enjoying myself outside of Riftbound. And I think that actually helped a lot.
I can agree with that. I have definitely been a victim of overthinking things in life in general, and sometimes it's just a case to go, okay, I've done everything I can do and I'm ready, and it's anything more at this point is going to just make me doubt the decisions I've already made. So I'm just going to take a step back. I'm going to try and perfect parry 140 times on Expedition 33, this stupid boss.
There you go.
Actually just step away, just go, we're ready, and then we're just going to show up on the day and do everything.
Yep, that's how it felt.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice in general. So there was a situation that came up at the event, which I would imagine is not going to be happening at future events, which is basically the deck lists got leaked, from my understanding, which is one player sold all the deck lists, so everybody got given the deck lists of the top cut, so everybody could prepare appropriately.
Yeah.
And that obviously ruins a deck like this, where so much of it's in mind games of what you could have as opposed to what you don't have. You can't represent tricks that you don't have in the deck list, or that they know you only have a smaller amount of.
Yeah.
This obviously had a massive impact in your top 64 match. Your opponent, I believe they went on to the top 8. Was that George?
No, my opponent was a Chinese player whose name... Oh, it was Talion, something like that. Valian.
Right.
He was a Chinese player who had played in every one of the Chinese regionals and top cutted in 3 out of 5 of them. And I was like, wow, that's super cool, dude.
That is actually really impressive. For some reason, I thought that was George, because I knew George played in all the regionals and he won one.
No.
Yeah, so there is a real question there. If your deck list was hidden, do you think you would have won that game based on what they played? Was it very much because they knew how to play that they were at the advantage?
I do believe that if my deck was closed, if our decks were closed, I could have won that set. Game 1 was going to be a wash no matter what.
Yeah.
And game 2 I won even with missing a trigger on my opponent's Arena's Greatest. And then game 3 was very close. Yeah, and there were a lot of moments in these games where my opponent is asking the judge for Oracle text of cards that I hadn't shown in the match, and asking for the numbers of cards in my trash for a Raza that I hadn't shown. And a lot of the cards were not used on stream either. Like Raza wasn't used in stream, so that card wasn't shown to the majority of people. Tide Turner wasn't used on stream either. So there were a lot of my good tech cards that didn't get shown off on the match, which was pretty nice for me. Because I went and watched the match to see what people would know about.
Yeah, I get it.
So there was definitely some aspect there that's like, okay, if I had the ability to play my tricks closer to my chest, how much EV would that have given me? And I think the answer is quite a lot. That third game was extremely close, and him knowing to play around cards that I hadn't shown yet in the match really benefited him.
Yeah, because you had quite a good run on the top 8, considering the amount of Annies that were there at that point.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about that. The bracket was very good for me. There was a lot of MFs, there were a lot of Annies, there were a lot of Ys, and I like all of those matchups. The Kai'Sas are the only ones that are tough, and even then it's not impossible. I can play through Kai'Sa pretty well. I mean, even my top cut opponent, we 2-1. So it's I won 2, he 2-1.
Yeah.
So it's it's not unplayable, clearly, but At that disadvantage, it was very tough. And that was why I ended up having to play super risk lines. Like game 3, I'm going second. And if I'm going second against Kai'Sa, we're already starting at a bad foot. So I have to play into everything. I played into his Falling Star. I played into a Watcher. And he didn't have the Falling Star, but he did have the Watcher. So I lose the game.
Yeah.
And that's just what I had to take because it felt like my tricks wouldn't matter at that point. Because going second and my opponent having perfect knowledge of the list makes it real tough.
So I've got 2 offshooting questions to that. One is about feature matches in general. Can you refuse a feature match and say, oh, I'd rather not be on camera? Or is that you have to accept the feature matches?
I think you have to accept the feature matches.
Okay, because that was something we used to get back when I worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! It was a case of like, we'd had a sheet for players to sign up that said they don't want to feature, and then we said, okay, but when you get to day 2, you can't refuse the feature match without conceding. But we'd then try and choose around that because there were players. What we found was it was discouraging players to bring really fun decks to the tournament because we want to feature them. They're the best players. They're the ones that people tune into the stream for. And then they were like, well, I'm not going to play anything cool that might do really well until people know how it works. But let's take an expansion on that. If all top cuts were open deck lists, would you prepare on champions that were lesser known, or would you just give up on the Rogue Dream if the deck lists were always open?
No, I think the deck list should be open.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually a proponent of fully open tournaments. I think even from Swiss, it should be open. That's how I personally feel. I think that's the most competitive way to play the game. Mm-hmm. And I think while that loses value for a deck like this, I think it is still, you can still play decks like this and get value because even if you know all the cards, like I have a 1 of Charm.
Yeah.
Your choice to play around this 1 of Charm all game or lose to it the one time I have it is a pressure that I'm putting on you just from my deck building expression.
Yeah, which is really cool. And I guess there's one of the things that there's always been a problem for TCG tournaments is people that come with big groups have scouts and they share information. They're like, okay, you're playing against that guy. I played him last round. And this is everything he has in his deck.
Yeah.
And that kind of scouting, if you go as sort of like a solo agent, as it were, you're at a massive disadvantage. And open deck lists does kind of tip that, where it's like, I don't need a big circle of friends to do well at a tournament. So I can understand the reasoning for that.
Yeah, and I don't think these decks are like that much disadvantaged. I think my deck list would look different if I knew that about an open top cut.
Yeah.
For example, I would probably have that Ride the Wind inside. It would be in main instead.
Yeah.
Because I need my opponent to have to play around that every game. Them not having to play around it game 1's pretty problematic and was one of the reasons that led to the game 1 blowout in top cut as well. So it's like, yeah. But I'm a big proponent of open deck lists in general. I think they're more competitive. I think they make deck building matter more than closed deck lists. I just can't. It's just not acceptable when it is sudden.
Yeah, no, I can completely understand that frustration. There's so many rogue players would have been in that exact same situation where it's just like I think where it's like, okay, like the cat's out of the bag and it was unintentional, and I wasn't prepared for that. Otherwise, I would have built my deck differently under the understanding that my opponent was going to look at it, and that would have changed how the match played out. But it was a hell of a run, all things considered, in the unfortunate way that it ended. And he did win the best of Yasuo and made it to top 64. And it's a real shame because you probably would have had a good run on that top place, and that would have completely changed everything. Because when we looked at the Chinese tournaments, there were like no one was playing Yasuo. Annie was massively underrepresented, and then the first Western tournament ends up, the meta is completely different, driven mostly by your playtesting partner.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah, I guess that's something to keep in mind for the next one. Are you planning to go to Vegas, or are you coming over to Italy? I say coming over, I don't live in Italy, but
yeah, I'm definitely going to Vegas. I won't be going to Italy, mainly because it's too short notice between Italy and Vegas. It's like that's a lot of travel. That's a lot of travel to do between. I don't really want to do all that, but I'll go to Vegas. Yeah.
I want to do both. I'm going to do Italy, but my plan is to try and do both. I've just got to position myself to be able to do it and not die, and that's also very important. So I want to look ahead now to Spirit Forward Set 2. So we've got Yasuo, and also entering in that color combination, we've got Irelia. Are you going to be sticking to Yasuo, exploring Irelia, or perhaps going in a different direction for Vegas? Like, what's kind of speaking to you right now?
I mean, right now we're just sort of exploring the set, figuring out what the meta is, because I can't build a deck like Yasuo if I don't know what the meta is. It just can't exist, because I mentioned it's an answers deck, and I can't answer something I don't know what will be there. So mostly right now we have to find the problems of the set before we can find any answers. And currently I've been enjoying a lot of Fiora. Fiora's been pretty fun.
I think Fiora's pretty strong, actually. The pre-con that they're putting out for it is really good. It has like pretty much all of the great cards. I was like, this is a really good starter deck.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how they did the starters. I'm glad that there's at least one of a Sig. I think having the Sigs in the deck matters so much just for deck identity. So I'm pretty excited for how that... They added in the Epic Champs too, which is not something I necessarily cared about, but is cool for people who do care about that. But I think just having the Sigs in it immediately makes the starters more compelling.
For sure. So you're not entirely married to Yasuo at this point. You're looking for what deck do you want to express yourself with next time, and it's not like, hey, this is my champion, this is what I want to move forward with. I'm going to pick whatever makes the most sense for Vegas. Yeah,
I mean, at first it was all Irelia. Irelia is one of my favorite champions in the game. Irelia and Fiora are both like in my top 5. Yeah. So I was pretty excited about this set. But Irelia was the main one that I was super thrilled for. But then I got my hands on Irelia, and it's like, okay, this could just be Yasuo and it's better. Like, Defiant Dance is a strong card, and that's the only thing that I miss if I go back to Yasuo, but everything Irelia is doing is just more consistent and better in Yasuo, so I just feel very
why would you
disheartened with Irelia.
So that's actually really interesting. So you don't play the signature spell in your Yasuo deck at all, and you
Correct.
would get to play one with Aurelia, so that's, I guess, an advantage. And the Aurelia deck plays very, I want to say, differently to the Yasuo deck. It spends power much more aggressively from the playtesting I've had with it, with how it's shoving a ridiculously difficult to deal with Aurelia at you every single turn, conquering both points. Which, I guess maybe it's not entirely different from Yasuo then.
Yeah,
when you look at it.
I don't think it feels very different at all. I think Aurelia is just causing more problems for her legend to be used than Yasuo needs to do.
Yeah.
But at the core of it, it's doing basically the same stuff that Yasuo was. The biggest problem with the Aurelia deck is that it can't double cap turn 2 very consistently. It has to have Tide Turner, or you have to be okay with casting a card to double cap.
Yeah.
So your ways to double cap on turn 2 with Aurelia is either 2-drop plus a Tide Turner, and you had to have the 2-drop that wasn't Tide Turner in your hand on turn 1, or it's 2 2-drops plus a spell that you're willing to get rid of.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a much higher ask to double cap on turn 2 than other decks are. And it's like, okay, we can solve this problem by playing a Sneaky Deckhand. It's like, okay, well, we've played Sneaky Deckhand. What's the point of our legend now? This was a big benefit of the legend, is that we can have this sort of ability. And if we don't have this ability and we're having to use other cards to bandage it, it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's like, okay, I could go through all of those hoops and I could try and make it work, or I could just pay 2, turn my guy sideways, and it does everything that I want it to do.
Yeah, and I think that's just where I'm at with Aurelia, where Yasuo is just the better one, and they're not doing anything very unique to make me want to play Aurelia over Yasuo.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to play a set 1 legend, so I want to explore something new, and I just don't think it is that right now. So Fiora's it right now, who plays very much like an orange Aurelia with her readying ability as well.
Yeah, I think Fiora is very good. I really like the legend ability, although someone was saying to me, are you going to trigger this more than you do with like Volley Bear? And it's like, I think the decks are trying to do different things, but
yeah,
it was a strong argument when we were having a discussion. It was this open discussion. It was like, isn't this just Volley Bear's passive but different? And it's like, well, let's talk about it. But I think Parry is a great card. I think Orange Fiora is good. I think the Yellow Fiora free is also quite strong.
Yellow Fiora is the one that I use. I don't even run the orange one.
I like the orange one as a sniper for Yi matchups, or potentially for Rune Runners, which are going to be a big part of set 2. I think the answers that we're going to be looking for is going to be, can I act a Rune Runner, which is just a 6 energy 5 might unit that's with no power cost. It just says your opponent, I'm unaffected. I can't be chosen by your opponent, basically.
Yeah.
So you just kind of can't interact with it, and it's just like, cool, just stick a bunch of gear on this guy and say, can you answer my giant fortress of steel? You're like, well,
yeah, I mean, my solution to Rune Runner is just play Set Brawler and just go over it anyway.
Yeah, just beat him up. That'll also get it going. Fiora is like so broken with that, right? Because what is it? It's like he's not mighty when it comes into play. He triggers, which puts the buff counter on him, so he becomes mighty.
Yeah. And
then you spend the counter, so he's no longer mighty. Then he gains the might, and he activates. Fiora activates again, so he double mighty triggers her, and it's like,
yeah,
that's cracked. I love this. I really want to try Fiora out.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things with Fiora too, where I will spend my set buff on purpose when I play him. That way next turn he can become mighty and I can ready him to bring him back with Fiora.
Oh yeah, so then you don't have to keep losing the buff when he gets killed. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, well, it's more so that he can become mighty when he conquers. That way he can ready and come back to base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So I
'cause
think
you re-put the buff back on.
yeah, so I think there's a lot of cool lines with Fiora that I'm experiencing and experimenting with to try and make her good. I think she feels good. I think she's a little still under the power of what some of the rest of the set's doing, like with the Ruin Runner things or like Imperial Decree spam.
Yeah.
But I am enjoying her currently.
Well, that's awesome. Before we wrap up, there's one thing I'm going to start doing every episode. And yes, I've shamelessly stolen this from Diary of a CEO, but I want to get each of my guests to leave a question for the next person that we're going to be having on about Riftbound in terms of deck building or how they think about the game. I'd like to give you the honor of being giving the first question for our next guest.
Okay, now I got to figure out what a question is.
By all means, we could just cut the bit in between you figuring it out.
Oh, yeah. This is the hardest question you've asked all day.
I probably should have given you forewarning about this one. It's just something that I just wanted to start adding in because I realized it's such an opportunity to sort of get top level players thinking of questions for other players. It'd be fun to sort of do that. And
yeah.
I mean, it could be a super insightful or deep one, or it could just be as simple as lease in, smash, or pass. Like, you know, what.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to think of something that, like, So I guess my question would be, like, why do you use a playmat? This has been something that has been in deep debate with me in the past, where I was like, I'm never going to use a playmat because I don't need to keep my cards protected. But then I started using a playmat, and I could just pick up the cards. And I really want to know if I'm the crazy one in this, where I only use a playmat because it helps me pick up my cards. Is that a crazy thing? That's what I want to know.
I'm going to ask that question, but fun analog to that is I had a friend of mine from a long time ago, used to play with like a bar mat. He just got one of the ones from like one of the pubs, and he was just like rolling it out and playing his cards on that. It's just kind of or like a tea cloth. He'd bring like a tea towel and he'd play like on that just to mess with people that spent all their money on accessories. I thought that was really funny. But
that's funny, yeah.
It's a fair question. But Gail, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate having you for today's interview. I would love to send people your way. Where can people come and find you in the online world if they want to see more of your content or see what you're getting up to?
Yeah, I've been posting more on Twitter now. So I have my Twitter, which is Ghaelwinds with 2 S's, and my YouTube, which I should be putting out a Kaisa matchup guide here in a bit, which is Ghaelwinds Riftbound. Those are probably the 2 best places to find more things from me.
That's really awesome, man. We will include the links down below in the description so you guys can go immediately find that. Please go ahead and watch that video about the in-depth details for Yasuo. We've covered a lot here today, but all of the ins and outs and intricacies of the deck building and how you pilot this legend, that's going to be found over on Ghaelwinds' channel. And of course, we'd love it if you could also hit that subscribe button for us, as of course any support that you can give us will help us continue to grow, and we can keep bringing you more great content, and you'll be the first to know about it. But for now, let's wrap it up here again. Gail, good luck. Hopefully meet you in Vegas in person. Maybe I'll get you to sign a Yasuo or something. All right. Cheers, man. And we'll catch you next time. Cheers.